Hello, I'm Mario Anderson, and welcome to In Focus Kentucky. Each week we take a look at issues that matter to you and talk directly to the lawmakers, community organizers, and people who help shape those policies. On today's episode, we are taking a closer look at juvenile justice reform in Kentucky and learning how those in our state are working to make youth justice systems work more effectively for youth and public safety. Joining me now to talk more about this is Kentucky State Senator Whitney Westerfield. And Whitney, he represents the 3rd Senate District, which covers all of Christian, Todd, and Logan counties over in western Kentucky. Senator, welcome back to In Focus Kentucky.
Thanks for having me back, Mario. I appreciate it.
Definitely. And let's talk with you. During much of your time as state senator, you've primarily focused a lot of legislation and policy that relates to criminal and juvenile justice reform.
Sure.
What is it about this issue that interests you so much?
Well, like every other legislator, I want to make sure Kentucky's safe. I want to make sure our communities are safe. Having been a prosecutor before I ran for the state senate, it's near to my heart. And a lot of these issues affect the criminal justice system, affect how prosecutors and defense attorneys do their work. And there were inefficiencies that I saw as a practitioner in court. And there were already debates going on when I first got this job, and I was blessed with the opportunity to serve as chairman, and will continue to do that in the 2019 session. And I've wanted to not waste my time. There are things that we can tackle to make not just Kentucky safer, but do so more efficiently, and do so in a way that's more equitable and cost-effective to taxpayers, but that ultimately keeps our community safe. And there have been a number of issues where I've been able to do that. It's been gratifying work to have some successes there.
Now, during the 2017 legislative session, you were front and center with the Senate Bill 120, which was a prison reform and reentry bill, and it focused largely on ensuring that ex-offenders would have the abilities and opportunities to be able to rejoin the society.
Absolutely.
So, break that down.
Because most of them are going to. Most of the people that are in custody, state or federal for that matter, most of those people are going to come back home. If the Department of Corrections is intended to correct the behavior, then we need to look at whether or not it's actually accomplishing that. Anybody can hold somebody and just stick them in a room and keep them segregated from society and not harm anybody for a fixed period of time based on a sentence. But if we're not doing anything to make sure they don't come back, then we're doing a disservice, and we're wasting that quality time when they're sitting there in a jail cell somewhere or in a prison cell. So 120 worked on making reentry processes better and giving inmates a better shot at success to get out. There were things related to those inmates that are struggling with substance abuse disorders. There were things related to employment, lowering some of the barriers or removing them altogether so that those folks can get out. One of the biggest indicators of recidivism is the lack of employment. Recidivism being the rate at which you reoffend, or the rate at which offenders in the state reoffend. Not having a job is a big deal. If you don't have a job and you can't pay your restitution, can't provide for your family, what do you turn to? You turn to crime. Yeah, you turn to the things that got you into prison in the first place. So there were some smart things and sort of no-duh things that we could have done and did accomplish in Senate Bill 120 to make that process of reentry as smooth and as effective as we possibly could. And there's still more work to be done there, but that's the objective. We want to make sure that once you're in there, we correct the behavior, not just punish it, correct it. We don't want you back. It's expensive to put you there. You're taken away from your family. Kentucky, 2 years ago, and we're still, I think, number 2 in the country, but 2 years ago, we were the top state in the nation with incarcerated parents of youth, of children. That's a terrible statistic to be first place in, and we can fix that. It's better if we don't have our citizens behind bars, but leading successful, productive lives for their families and for their communities. And the closer we can get to that, the better off we all are.
And give us the backstory on that Senate Bill 120. That's something, obviously, that drafting the language in that doesn't happen overnight.
No.
There's many conversations that you'll have to have, even with the community. But was that multiple months of kind of preparation?
No question. That was the work. Senate Bill 120 was the product of many months of what was called the CJ-PAC at the time, the Criminal Justice Policy Assessment Council, that was established by the governor and had a number of different stakeholders and roles in that. And I think that's the best way to achieve that sort of reform. Any legislator unilaterally can just think up a bill and file it and try to push it. But when you're dealing with something as complicated as the criminal justice system, whether it's regarding adults or youth, you've got a lot of players. You've got judges that have valuable practical experience on the front lines, as do prosecutors, as do defense attorneys, as do law enforcement officers. In our juvenile justice bill in 2014, the same sort of thing. It was a year-long effort to talk about what the statistics were in Kentucky, where our failings were, and to hear from the people that were in the system every day, that worked on it on the front lines, and got their feedback on what we ought to do to improve it. And not only do you get the best input, but you get buy-in. Then the idea isn't Whitney's. It's never that legislators, but it's a group effort. And all those folks, frankly, are empowered that way. And now it's their policy. It's their bill. And that's the most successful public policy you can come up with, I think. So much of the fight after you get the thing passed is in the implementation of it. And you can't get it implemented well and statewide uniformly done unless you've got the buy-in from all the stakeholder groups. I think that's just the best way to inform public policy and get it through.
We're visiting with Kentucky State Senator Whitney Westerfield. Stay with us on In Focus Kentucky as we continue the conversation on juvenile justice reform.
You and I would have done something stupid when we were 15 that we won't do now. We appreciate the risk and the consequences of our behavior. Our justice system should reflect that scientific thinking.
But your local Weather on the Ones forecast is coming up right after this break.